So this should be notes 2 for this last unit of ours, and you're going to do this or use this for questions 13 through 26 on the study guide, which will be due on the 30th before midnight, which is Thursday. So what we've been having in 2020 so far is a whole primary season, right? Really since early February, I believe. Now, it's really died down the media coverage of it, mostly because, well, everything's covering this whole virus thing, and it's going to be hard to gather people up into areas to go vote, where a bunch of people are around each other when states aren't, are banning that. Um, but on the Democratic side, what we've been having is whittling it down. It's basically down to, Bernie versus Biden, and it sure looks like Biden's probably going to be the nominee. But as we have narrowed it down, how does that happen is the question. Like, what is this whole primary season about? That is the point, is to take the parties and all the candidates within those parties that are running for president, and how do we get it down to just one person that's going to run for the actual presidency in November? So we're going to use 2016 as an example because obviously 2020 is not done yet. In 2016, you really started with these main six Democrats, and then all of these, like, over 20 some Republicans. Okay. And, how did we get all down to just one? All right. So throughout this, and I did throw on there's been a shift since 72. We really used to let the parties handle this. Now, with the intense media coverage and more people voting in primaries and stuff, we're very focused on the candidates themselves. It's not as much, how does Joe Biden represent the Democratic Party as much as, hey, how are Biden and Bernie different? We really focus on their individual personalities and their quirks and what they're bringing to the table. Same thing with the Republicans. Trump was always considered such an outsider, right? These people are the establishment. They're the Republicans. This guy is the random wild card businessman who just threw his hat in the ring that nobody thought really had a chance until Republicans just started voting for him in these primaries, and you'll see that happen here in a second. Now, I keep saying the word primary. Here's the big difference. This is as easy as I can make it. Primaries are whittling down candidates. The general elections is the one that actually has the winners. If you win a primary, congrats. You're on your way to being the candidate for the general election. This is before this. Think of your homecoming voting, right? You vote the entire class first, right? Everybody's on the ballot. That's the primary. And then it gets whittled down to the 5 main ones that run in the general election, right? You vote 2 separate times. You vote between everybody here and then just for those between those 5 here. I think that's probably the best analogy I can come up with. So we've been whittling it down. We are right in the middle of this process right now for 2020 for the Democrats. Republicans don't have to do this because they know it's going to be Trump. I mean, I think they run their own primaries in the states anyway, but it's more of a formality because no really main Republican has said, hey, I'm going to challenge Trump for the nomination. So looking at this timeline, right, from January through June is primary and caucus season. We'll get to the difference between those here in a second. Right? And so this is when all the elections and voting and the people get to say their piece is, and it's all gearing up to here in July, sometimes August. They were going to be in July in 2020, but now because of the coronavirus, the parties are moving them back to August and could even move them back into September because they're really hoping to have their big conventions in these cities that they want to. But that is usually when they are, sometime late summer. Okay? And at these conventions, that's where the votes officially get tallied, although we know what the result's going to be pretty much all the time. And that's where they officially make their nomination. And then the nominee, as in Trump or Biden, gets up at the convention and gives their big speech and says, oh, I'm so glad I represent you, blah, blah, blah. Here's what we need to change. We're going to win in November. And that is really when the election day is. It is the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. About a month after that is when the Electoral College officially meets and casts their votes, right? Here is when the people vote, and basically the electors are pledged based on who won the state. Here is where the Electoral College, the actual 538 people, go and meet and cast their official vote. This is when they don't necessarily have to go with the people's votes, but they're supposed to. And then Inauguration Day is January 20th. So that's the timeline, okay? So whoever wins in November will officially go into the White House, either for the first time or the second time, January 20th, 2021. So, what is a caucus, and why does everybody pay attention to Iowa, is the question, because they are always first.
The Hawkeye State hosts the first official vote of the 2012 presidential campaign. The word caucus comes from the Native American word meaning a gathering of tribal leaders. There are no voting booths or machines like in a traditional primary. Iowans simply gather according to political party local spots like churches, fire stations, or private homes. Republicans with a simple secret ballot system. Democrats are more complex process. Caucus separate into small groups according to the candidates they support. It'll be less complicated this year. President Obama is the Democrat. Since 1972, Iowans have proudly voted first, and state political titans now feel their power to keep their First Nation caucus status, and the attention and economically them with them. In 2008, an estimated $1 million was spent by that candidate in Iowa. A good showing in Iowa is vital. No candidate that has finished worse than third has ever gone on to win the presidency.
So a couple things there that are important, right? A caucus is more of like a meeting where you go and you gather as a group and you discuss who you want to be the candidate. It's like a conversation. And you may also take a vote there, but it's open. You talk about it before you might take an actual vote. It just kind of depends on how the party wants to do it. But a caucus is a discussion. A primary is just you go to wherever the primary election is being held, you don't talk to people, you don't tell them who you're going to vote for, and you actually go behind a curtain or to a private voting booth, and you actually check a name by a box or use the computer or whatever. But a caucus is a discussion, a primary is an actual election. All right, now the other thing that video said is that Iowa fights like crazy to stay first. Iowa's not big, right? There are not many delegates like up here. 28 is hardly any, you'll see here in a second. Okay, now here were the results in Iowa. All right, Ted Cruz actually won. All right, but the big surprise was that Donald Trump also was right in it and got about a quarter of the people of Iowa were like, hey, Trump, he's my guy. This was so much better than anybody ever thought he would do. Okay, and that's the big thing about Iowa is that it shows momentum. Okay, and so when we say that they won these delegates, really what this means is delegates are people. Okay, so these delegates that are going to end up at the convention in late summer, they're the ones that go to the convention and actually cast their official vote. So when we say that Ted Cruz won 8 delegates, that means that he has 8 people that are supposed to go vote for him when it's time in the convention. Now that is going to be like 5 months later, but he's got them in his pocket. But the surprise here was that Trump actually won 7. All right. Now again, Iowa, it's not like it's very representative of the United States, and because it's a caucus, it's not like a lot of people are going to these places and spending a couple of hours discussing who they want, right? Iowa's not very diverse at all either. So why do we care? They're first. Okay. And Iowa fights like crazy to stay first because of all the media attention. Think about when news cameras or when everybody comes and campaigns there, that is money for the state, right? They're eating food at restaurants, they're spending money on hotels, they're buying gas in Iowa. Like it is a huge part of their economy. Okay, so don't sleep on how important it is to be early on. States are always fighting to become earlier because if you're earlier, you matter more. If you're one of the last like 20 states out of the 50 to have their primaries, their caucuses, a lot of times we know who's going to win and it just doesn't matter much anymore. Okay, so how many did Trump get from Iowa? 7. He's got 1,230 delegates to go. Yeah. So again, Iowa, not a big slice of the pie. All right. And then everything goes to New Hampshire. They're always second, and they fought like crazy to stay second to see whoever won in Iowa, whoever had a good showing in Iowa, how are they going to do in New Hampshire? And New Hampshire is more primary, so they usually have better voter turnout. It's not as much of a discussion as much as now people take the info. Hey, here's what happened in Iowa. Is it going to translate over to New Hampshire as well? Are people paying attention? Can Trump keep up the momentum, so to speak? Now, there's several different kinds of primaries and caucuses because a lot of state parties and states get to choose how they do this, but a lot of times they're afraid to just let anybody from the public come in and vote or anybody from the public walk into those doors and discuss at these caucuses. So there are closed primaries and caucuses where they say, listen, you have to be a registered Republican to come vote for the Republican candidates, or you have to be a registered Democrat to come vote for the Democratic ones. Okay, there's also semi-closed where they say, all right, if you're a registered member, great, or if you are a registered independent, we'll allow you to come in. In Kansas, Republicans have closed primaries. They run primary elections where you actually vote by ballot in Kansas, and they are closed. You have to be a registered Republican to vote in them. Okay, Democrats in Kansas are mostly open. They will pretty much, or at least semi-close. I forget which one, but they definitely let independents go and talk in their caucuses in Kansas. So Democrats, because they they obviously want to cater to independents because Democrats have a harder time winning in Kansas anyway, so they're more open to drawing the public in and getting their interest in any way they can. So a lot of times the closed ones are in the states that the party has control over. It makes sense for Republicans to want to be closed in Kansas because they don't want other people being able to vote and sabotage their primaries. You know, if a bunch of Democrats go vote in there, if they could go vote for the Republican primaries, why wouldn't they vote for really weak candidates in the primaries that they think a Democratic candidate will have a better chance to beat in the general election? So by having it closed, you're kind of protecting who the candidate will be. So a lot of strategy going on there is my point. Here's what an open ballot would look like, okay, for an open state. And here's more of a closed one, right? When you register to vote, you have to choose your affiliation, like for a primary, okay? So that's how they know. You have to register for primaries just as well as the general elections in Kansas. So on to New Hampshire, right? And Trump wins New Hampshire, gets 12 more delegates. Again, only 23 available here, and there's only 28 in Iowa. So this is a very small chunk of the overall 1,237 or whatever it is. No, that wasn't it. Whatever, I forget the number how many he needed to clinch, but he doesn't have very many yet. But what he does have after those first two is momentum, and that is the whole point of this early on in the process because the rest of the country is paying attention to what happens in Iowa and New Hampshire. And even though those two states don't necessarily represent what the rest of the country is thinking, if you have a good showing, you're on the radar. And Trump got himself on the radar, and all of a sudden, it was almost like, yeah, I'm going to go vote for that guy. I'm not going to be part of the establishment. Okay? And it's almost like this sense of like rebellion, to go vote for this guy who just says what he thinks and doesn't care, what comes out of his mouth. And he's a businessman and he's an outsider and he's going to drain the swamp. And they ran a smart campaign and okay, he got the momentum. All right. Now you have some establishment Republicans freaking out at this point saying, really? This guy? And here's how the next 13 states went down. Trump wins South Carolina, Nevada, and Alabama. Cruz wins Alaska, although not a lot to win there, right? And then Trump wins Arkansas, Georgia, and Massachusetts. Rubio wins Minnesota. Cruz wins Oklahoma, and then Trump wins Tennessee. Cruz wins his home state of Texas. Okay, and then Trump wins Vermont and Virginia. So basically extended his lead and widened his lead. Poor John Kasich didn't win anything. Okay, and after all those states, there was the delegate count up here. All right, it was basically down to Trump and Cruz. But obviously, the more you get, right, if Cruz is going to make up this 100 delegates that he's down, he's running out of opportunities to do it, right? Because there's less and less and less available. So this was really down to these two, but man, Trump sure had, all the advantages in the world. Okay, and then comes Super Tuesday, all right, which is a day where a lot of states gather together and have their primaries, their caucuses. So there are a lot of delegates at stake on Super Tuesday. All these 10 were on that particular day. And now it shifts. It's not always the same 10, right? But Cruz wins Kansas, interestingly enough. Trump wins Kentucky, Louisiana. Cruz wins Maine. Rubio wins Puerto Rico. They have their own primaries. Okay, they're in the system. Hawaii goes to Trump, Idaho goes to Cruz, Michigan, Mississippi to Trump. Okay, and after all that, you can see, all right, Trump held firm. Okay, now his lead's about 80 some, so Cruz gained on him a little bit, but still running out of opportunities. And now here's where you have some Republican candidates that had not really won any states, or really got any delegates, hardly pledged them, start dropping out. Jeb Bush drops out, which is crazy because a lot of people considered him to be the front runner at the beginning of all of this. Okay, so we were wrong about the 2016 election in a lot of ways, not just for the general election, but also in the primaries too. Okay, Marco Rubio drops out, and Ted Cruz eventually drops out just because the math doesn't keep working out for him and the projections don't work out for him. Okay, John Kasich stayed in, even though he hadn't won jack squat, but it was mostly a protest against Trump, saying, we don't want this guy to be the representative of our party. Which I think there's still some Republicans in the back of their heads that maybe feel that way, but they haven't been able to say it out loud much, obviously. And the party has gone into Trump's grasp more and more over the last years of presidency. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, in the next 5, 10 years. If Trump is kind of out of the picture, what Republicans end up saying about him, because he was such an outsider. Did he change it forever? Are they going to start bad mouthing him? I don't know what's going to happen. It'll be interesting. Okay. But basically, he clinches on June 7th. Whatever delegates are out there kind of go to him. States do have their primaries, but once everybody's sure it's going to be him, obviously your voter turnout's going to go down. So if you're in the back of the line, you just don't matter as much. And that's why states work to get at least on Super Tuesday, so you matter a little bit more. Okay. So at the convention there, all those delegates gathered together and they cast their official ballots, and Trump became the official nominee. Conventions are a big deal, right? Big, big deal. A lot of people gather there. States want to host them. They move around from city to city. Usually they put their conventions in what is going to be a swing state or a competitive state. All right, you want to have that presence be there. So I probably should have looked up where they were going to be in 2020, but if we are even going to have a convention because of the coronavirus, that'll be interesting. So, all right, quickly let's talk about campaigns. All right, as they are going through this whole primary season and then the general election season too. All right, you're traveling around, you're catering to voters, you're on social media, you're talking about issues. Okay, you need a good staff that knows what they're doing. And as far as being a presidential nominee or candidate goes, okay, you have a lot of volunteers, but you also have a lot of paid staff. Okay, you get volunteers on the ground. Volunteers are the ones like kind of the grassroots stuff, right? The ones handing out flyers, the ones, sharing your posts, the ones, putting up posters at the post office or on, I don't know, telephone poles or wherever you can. Okay. But the paid staff, the ones that you are officially taking, the paid, you're actually reporting this income. You're taking your campaign donations, like you're keeping track of all this and they're filing tax returns and everything. You got a campaign manager, which Kellyanne Conway was Trump's. Okay, your finance chair was Steve Mnuchin, okay, who I believe is now head of the Fed, the Federal Reserve. Okay, and then you got press secretary and treasurer. Usually you have at least those four people. right, that you are paying, and you want them to be hopefully experienced and professional. Okay, so obviously your campaign manager is looking at things from a big picture standpoint with strategy and where to go and what to say. You also have a ton of speech writers that work with your press secretary, but they also both went on TV a lot too during Trump's campaign and talked. He takes care of obviously the monetary part, and so does the treasurer with the campaign as well. I don't know exactly what the difference between these two is, but there's a lot to keep track of with the money, so it makes sense to have more than one person. Okay, so the advantages, right, to having these professionals is that they know what they're doing, okay, and they know how to do damage control and handle the media and stuff. They can give good advice, but they do cost more money, okay? But sometimes having advice is good, and they can tell you just keep it simple.
Welcome, Quahog, to the Town Hall mayoral debate between incumbent Adam West and challenger Lois Griffin. We will now open up the floor to questions from a community at large.
Yes, Mrs. Griffin, how do you feel about those computer websites that put a blue square on the home of a sex offender?
Well, the safety of our children is a very important part of my plan for Quahog. I have a 12-point program for the security.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
No, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed, not yet.
Mayor West, if re-elected, would you increase the frequency of garbage pickup?
Well, citizen, that's an excellent question, and I thank you for it. I think it's great we live in a town where you can ask questions. Because without questions, we just have answers. And an answer without a question is a statement.
Oh, I like him. He looks me in the eye.
I'd like to have a beer with him. I'm voting for him.
I don't understand these people. He didn't even say anything and they're eating it up.
Lois, undecided voters are the biggest idiots on the planet. Try giving short, simple answers.
Sir, your question, please.
Mrs. Griffin, what do you plan to do about crime in our city?
A lot. Because that's what Jesus wants. 9/11 was bad.
I agree with that.
God, I can't believe how easy this is.
Mrs. Griffin, what are your plans for cleaning up our environment?
9/11.
Mrs. Griffin, what about our traffic problem?
9/11.
There you go. It's good to have, professionals that can tell you to just keep it simple. Hey, cater to the public. Here's what you say, here's what you don't say. All right, here's how you answer questions. So what do you need money for, okay, in your campaign? Well, some of this is obvious, some of it is things you don't think about, but you might need office rental. Something that a lot of people don't often think about, right? But where's your headquarters at? Not everybody's a businessman. You have to actually go have a place for people to actually go and answer the phones and keep track of all this stuff. You need your salaries for your paid staff, postage. Now, if you are an incumbent, as in if you've already won, if you're already the president, if you're already the senator, if you're already a House rep, you have franking privilege, which means you have free postage to your constituents. But if you're not, postage costs a lot. You know what I mean? I mean, if you're going to send something, put some in the mail for 10,000 homes, think about how much that is just per stamp, okay? You might have travel expenses. You might have a bus, obviously, if you fly, okay? Printing, ink isn't cheap, okay? So if you're going to put flyers again or posters or whatever, that can add up quickly. And then TV commercials is where probably most of the money goes, especially if it's like prime time, 7 p.m. on major networks and stuff. Now, again, how much is the campaign actually making in commercials versus our interest groups making commercials for me in support of me? Either way, it's expensive, but again, there's a big difference between a campaign expense and an independent expenditure, which we'll get to later on this unit. But campaign has gone up, right? The cost keeps going up, and the way they do it keeps costing more money, pretty much. Now, what you hope is that the internet would maybe level the playing field and make you have to spend less money, right? Social media is a way that you can get your message out there for free. That did not used to be a thing. you can make some kind of YouTube video and throw it up there almost for free, right? So there are ways to cut expenses, um, but as long as people are still watching TV, right? And now, 30 years from now, when even the older generation of the United States has grown up with the internet and is on social media and stuff, maybe it really will help to level the playing field. And I kind of hope so, because the amount of money you have to spend to become president or even just win a House seat, I think is out of control. That's my personal opinion. Um, but you got to do it to be competitive right now. It is what it is. Okay. And so fundraising, like it says, has become the dominant action. Like if you're not raising funds, you're probably not going to win. And that's a lot of times the difference between a winner and a loser is how much money do you have, because that directly affects your exposure. What do people know about you, and how much do they see your face, and how are you getting messages across to them? Social media is a great way to do it cheap, but you also have to do all those ways that are not cheap at the same time. All right, so question: if I win the primary, if I'm running the general election, I'm actually trying to win a seat in the House, the Senate, or the presidency, where am I trying to run my campaign? Who am I trying to appeal to? Answer is E. I'm right in the middle of my party. I'm not way middle. I'm not way to the left or way to the right. I am smack dab in the middle, because the best way to win a general election is to get your party and everybody that is considered to be your party to turn out and vote for you. So you are in the middle of that. That's where you try to direct your messages. Get all the Republicans or all the Democrats. I'm not trying to play to the other side. I'm not trying to play to the extreme people. I want my people to show up for me. Okay? So, the other option besides advocating for yourself, you can attack the other side.
Mitt Romney causes cancer, and Obama will force you into a gay marriage. You can say anything in a negative political ad, and that's today's BFD.
Brain Food Daily.
Hey everyone, I'm Trayvon Free with Brain Food Daily. You been watching much TV lately? Caught up on the Honey Boo Boo, Dance Moms, Frontline? If so, you know that negative campaign ads are clogging the airwaves. This election season, we've had to deal with more rage than Ann Coulter's personal assistant. A whopping 70% of presidential ads in 2012 have been negative, up from just 9% in 2008. So why you mad, bros? You can thank Citizens United, that line drive to the balls of democracy. That landmark Supreme Court decision lifted all limits on political spending by corporations, and after that, political ad spending rose 1,100%. That's a lot of percent. Look, rich people spending their way into politics is nothing new, but just like buying weed, you used to have to be subtle about it. Check out this ad from Priorities USA, a pro-Obama super PAC funded entirely by outside donors.
My wife became ill, and then I took her up to the Jackson County Hospital and admitted her for pneumonia, and that's when they found the cancer, and by then it was stage 4. There was nothing they could do for her. And she passed away in 22 days. I do not think Mitt Romney realizes what he's done to anyone.
No, I don't think Mitt Romney realizes he gave your wife cancer either. But it's not just the Democrats. Both sides are guilty of taking their opponent's words out of context. Check this one out from the pro-Romney super PAC Crossroads.
Barack Obama's got lots of excuses for the bad economy.
Headwinds coming from Europe. We've had a string of bad luck. An earthquake in Japan. An Arab Spring.
An ATM, you don't go to a bank teller.
They're not even quoting full sentences. Like Twitter trolls, none of these attack ads add anything of substance to the debate. These groups are spending all their cash on ads that take sound bites out of context, rewrite history, all with one goal in mind: keep the voters scared and confused. The sad thing is, it works. You can make the best person in the world look guiltier than Chris Christie in line at Cinnabon. It's not even that hard. Here, I'll show you.
What do we really know about Jesus? He associates with prostitutes and lives with 12 men. He vandalized a place of worship and turned water into wine. He claims to be the Son of God. So who is Joseph? Listen to his own words.
Judge not, and you will not be judged. Turn the other cheek. Sell all that you have and give to the poor.
Jesus, bad for business, bad for America.
So again, tying it back to Citizens United, since all this is considered free speech and campaign spending is not considered speech, yeah, hey, the attack ads are on full-blown strike, and you're going to see that. It's going to be crazy what Biden and Trump put on TV, I'm sure, come between, I guess, August and November. So last part here, some strategies, okay? These are pretty simple, but as you're mapping out how to do your campaign, you got to keep all these things, okay? Where are you strong as a candidate? Where are you weak? Okay, what do you focus on? What do you don't? Okay, like as far as presenting yourself, where does your money come from? Of course, right? What type of campaign are you running? All right, what's your slogan? Who are you trying to appeal to? Are you talking about the future? Are you talking about the past? Are you going after your candidate? Are you talking, are you taking the high road, so to speak? Whatever it is. Okay, I know a lot of these go together. I mean, your image is directed by your strengths and weaknesses, and so does your type of campaign. And also, what issues are you stressing? Okay, you know. So in the end, okay, you're going to see this happen throughout the rest of 2020, and make sure that you get these questions done. This is what, for 13 through 26 here. All right, so get that done by Thursday the 30th, and all right, stay healthy.